Today on Locked On Red Wings, who has a higher ceiling, Sebastian Cossa or Trey Augustine? We answer your questions in this Mailbag episode.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's a host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a sports writer for C and G newspapers, while I'm a color commentator for Oakland University ACHA D1 men's hockey. Scotty, today we're going to be doing a mailbag episode. We asked the people what questions they wanted us to answer, and we got a lot of responses. Now, unfortunately, that does mean that we can't get to every single question. So if your question is not answered, apologies. I'll let you know we did read it.
Also, it's May.
Right. Well, plenty of opportunities.
I'm going to be real with you. We're probably going to have multiple mailbags throughout the rest of the summer. Yes.
So we carefully curated our questions that we wanted to have answered.
Carefully curated. This dude's Eminem. That's crazy.
Okay. I was trying to think of something witty to respond with, and I came out. Is that an Eastside Diamond Hoppers t-shirt?
No, actually. It is a Norfolk Tides. In Norfolk, that is the AAA affiliate for the Baltimore Orioles. They have a beautiful park. Went there a couple summers ago.
I saw just the top of it, and it looked like the frog logo from the USPBL.
Right.
So I thought that's
green and everything. So I don't have a Hoppers jersey, but I do have, or t-shirt. I do have a Birmingham Bloomfield Beavers t-shirt, though.
Yeah. I had a Unicorns t-shirt, but it got worn out, and because we worked there at the same year, and we didn't know it. We didn't know each other back then.
How is that? That's like let's get to questions, but like right. Like, we literally didn't know each other, but worked at the same park for the same summer. I think that's hilarious.
Destiny. We were meant to be together, Scotty.
Really?
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Let's get to the first question. It's the headliner question, so if you come here via YouTube or have read the title, you know this is going to be in the episode, and it's regarding the goaltending. Tim Brayolt, 9405, this is a question from YouTube, asked, is Augustine projected to be better than Cossa at this time? If Cossa doesn't play any meaningful games this year, what are we going to do with him? And I think that's a really fun question to answer because there's a lot of discourse around Trey Augustine and Cossa. We have two stellar goaltending prospects. Trey Augustine won goaltender of the year in the Big Ten this year, playing with Michigan State University, was the backbone of a very, very good MSU team. Sebastian Cossa was solid again with the Grand Rapids Griffins, but kind of unraveled like the rest of the team did down the stretch. So it left a little bit of a crack there, Scotty, for people to start asking, well, maybe Augustine is the guy. Where do you sit on these two guys on who could have the higher ceiling?
Wow. I think there's a lot of nuance in this type of question. If you're asking me purely who has the higher ceiling, I think it is still Cossa. I also think it is somewhat difficult to answer fully, given that the highest level that Augustine has played at is collegiate, right? Like Cossa is in the AHL and has kind of worked his way up through the system in that regards. Now, collegiate hockey is in a very good place. That's good competition. But there is a very, very big difference between collegiate and like the AHL, right? So like, I think that is something that will become more of a conversation once Cossa leaves state, once Augustine leaves state. I feel like that is something that, we can compare their stats in the same league, a few years apart, but like they will have actually retreaded a little bit. For now, I think it's difficult to answer, but I have to default to Cossa just with what we've seen, right? Like it's not as though it's what we've seen has been terrible. Obviously, the second half of this year maybe struggled a little bit, but we have seen flashes of dominance at a few different levels now. And on top of that, you just have the prowess and the, I don't know, what's the word? I can't think of the word. Expectation, I guess, is what I'll go with, because I can't think of the actual word. Reputation, maybe, going into the draft, right? Like he was supposed to be not the best goalie in the draft. That part was the Red Wings being the Red Wings and kind of, taking him higher than expected, but was still expected to be a back end of the first round pick type of guy. So I think the answer is still Cossa, but I think it's something that could change once Augustine gets into the pro levels.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking ceiling straight up, I still think it's Cossa, and that's just because the raw tools that Cossa has are things that Augustine doesn't, which is size, pure size and athleticism. I mean, Sebastian Cossa is 6'6". Trey Augustine is 6'1". Like, these are two guys who are 5 inches apart in height. And of course, there's the pure athleticism that we were sold on at the day of the draft. Now, if we're talking about floor, I've pivoted, and I think Trey Augustine may have the better chance of being the more consistent goalie at the NHL level. I don't know how high that ceiling is going to be because, like you said, we have to wait to see him take that next step out of Michigan State into professional hockey. But you said it best, too. College sports is in a great place. The NCAA is one of the best developmental leagues for pro hockey now because it plays the North American style of the game. So a lot of guys who jump right from the NCAA can jump right into, we saw it with Ryan Leonard of the Washington Capitals. Now, we also saw that he might need some time in Hershey, because he didn't really play all that well in Washington, but that was because they jumped right into the playoffs. I digress. But, I think that he may have the higher floor. Also, I think there's like some other intangibles, too, to keep in mind. I think Trey Augustine is less shaken by bad performances. Like, he goes out there and he just plays his game. He's more robotic. For him, it's like, this is my job. Whereas Sebastian, at least I infer this by just watching him play and from what I read in articles, a lot more emotional of a goaltender. He can be knocked off his game, kind of like Jimmy Howard was. If he's knocked off his game, you might get a stretch of bad performances until he gets his confidence back. And that's something that is a little bit of concern with the development of Sebastian Cossa. Now, the second part of that question, with if Cossa doesn't play any meaningful games, what do you do with him? Nothing. He's an RFA. He's one of your prospects. You hold on to him and just keep
he's not.
It would be
anywhere.
disappointing if he doesn't play any games in the NHL this next season, but he just stays in the system, and you hope he continues to develop until your rights run out. That's all you'd keep doing. You saw it with Emil Viro today. Basically, his contract was up. He was a 2019 draft pick. It wasn't developing the way they wanted, so he went back overseas to the SHL. So if it doesn't play any meaningful games, then the onus is on him at that point. Like, you just got to become an NHL caliber goaltender. Scotty, let's go to a quick early break. We're 8 minutes in already. We spent too much time talking about the East Side Diamond Hoppers at the start of the show. And then when we come back, we'll answer another question. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. New to FanDuel? It's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
The NBA.
Nice job, too. You nailed that transition this time. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty. So the next question we have is going to be from MoFlo on Twitter. Do you think we see another rookie take a big step like Marco did? If so, who? When does the time run out for Cossa? We kind of just answered that. And what point do we trade him if he's not going to crack the roster? So the second part of that question, we just basically answered. So we'll focus on the first half regarding who do we think is the next breakout candidate for the Red Wings outside of Marco Kasper, I'm assuming in terms of the young players coming up. Scotty, you want to go ahead and answer this first?
Yeah, I mean, they've been compared to each other, I think, throughout their entire time in the system together, but I don't really see how the answer is anything other than Danielson. And that's not to say that there isn't more talent in Grand Rapids, and there's not going to be more debuts outside of just him, and we're not going to be impressed by more players outside of him. But just in terms of like expectation and kind of who the next in line is, I think it's fairly obviously Danielson. I think there's going to be, depending on what happens in free agency, probably some rumblings about him making the team out of camp. If he doesn't do that and he lights it up in GR, then you might be looking at a mid-season thing. Casper didn't make the team out of camp either, technically, right? So like
2 weeks later,
right? So I mean, we'll see. There's a handful of talent down there, which is really nice to be able to say. But I really think it's hard to argue against Danielson.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys I think can fit this bill, and I think it comes down to your definition of a breakout, right? Like a breakout season looks different for different players and different expectations. Like I think Carter Mazur very well could have a breakout season himself if he can stay healthy. I think you're looking at a guy who has probably a bottom 6 role, but 30 points from him. I think you would consider that a breakout season from a guy like Carter Mazur. Elmer Soderblom, I think, could have a breakout year. We saw flashes of how much he's improved this last season.
This kind of was too, right? Like
yeah, in a way. Yeah. But and you can have multiple breakout years, right? You
right.
just take another step forward in your development. So I think there's a couple of guys, but if I'm going to attach my wagon to somebody who's like more on the exciting end, I think I'll go in the same realm you will, and I'll go Amadeus Lombardi. This is a guy who has the NHL caliber offense. That is not the question. The question is basically, does he have NHL caliber defense? And that's kind of what's holding him up right now. Can he play both sides of the puck adequately enough to crack an NHL lineup, especially because he's a little undersized for the NHL center as a center, at officially listed as 5'10", and you know how those are usually bumped up a little bit, so he might be an inch or two shorter than that too. So Amadeus Lombardi has this NHL caliber shot, NHL caliber offense, NHL caliber hands. It's just whether or not he can play defense, but he could be a threat to make the lineup and be a little bit of a breakout candidate. Now, would I put my money on it? Probably not, but he's an exciting player to watch. And I think this kind of parlays perfectly into a question we have on Amadeus Lombardi, and this comes from Corey Padfield. He says, which player absolutely should not return next season, and will Amadeus Lombardi play 20 games for the Red Wings next season? So let's answer the second part of that first, because it is in reference to the guy we were just talking about. I don't think Lombardi plays 20 games next year with the Detroit Red Wings, just because I think there's enough players in front of him, both in Grand Rapids and on the NHL roster, that he's kind of blocked at the moment. And as I just put, he does need to work on his defense a little bit more before I can confidently say he's going to play at the NHL level. But I think 2 years from now, he would have a legitimate shot, especially if his offense continues to develop at the pace that it is.
Yeah, I'll go with no for now. I think that's also a question to kind of ask again, during camp or like after free agency, right? Because like we're flying under the assumption that the Wings are going to be in a position where they want to add, especially forwards to this team, and if they don't, then this conversation probably looks a whole lot different. But yeah, I think the assumption today, I think is even maybe a comfortable no.
Right. And the first half of that question, too, and I would consider him a dark horse candidate, by the way, because he did score at a torrid pace in less than, 20 fewer games than their top goal scorer last year. So, like, the offense may just outweigh the defense just enough to get him a look at the NHL level. Who knows? I'd consider him a dark horse, but my gut would say no for sure. But the front half of that question, Scotty, which player absolutely should not return next season? The cop-out answer is, I don't think anybody on this roster is an absolutely will not return. They said should, but like we saw this last offseason that it's hard to move contracts. Yzerman tried, and he couldn't do it. So there is a reality all these guys are going to return. But if we got to choose which player did not return, Scotty, who would you choose?
Justin Hall.
Okay. He's definitely one of the top candidates. For me personally, it's 3 bodies, right, that I would say should not return. And not counting expiring deals like Jeff Petrie, because I'm just assuming he doesn't get re-upped. He could. But Justin Holl's certainly on that list, as well as Vladimir Tarasenko and JT Compher. And now JT Compher, I'm willing, if he comes back, I won't be upset because he had a good first season with Detroit. He had an awful second season. One of the most what do they say, guys who just out there doing cardio guys in the league last season. But the reason I'd want to see us move on from him is just because he has that 5.25 cap hit, and you're looking at him as maybe your 4C. And that's a lot of money to play from a 4C. So if you can move on from him, I'd be fine with that. Tarasenko, because it's not working out, I'd be really okay with that because he's making over $4 million for one more year. Justin Holl is actually third on my list on that one, Scotty, just simply because as bad as this defensive core is, we still lack defensive depth and we still lack right side defensemen. Right now, you have on this roster with Jeff Petrie gone, you have two right shot defensemen, and that is Justin Holl and Moritz Seider. ASP, maybe. I'm thinking probably not unless he vastly improves in the offseason his defensive game. We saw a little bit. Again, you don't want to write a guy off because of 5 games in the AHL, but you saw that there were definitely areas for improvement in his defensive game. So you have two guys who have a right shot D, and McClellan proved that if you shelter him enough, he can be a competent defenseman on your third pair. So this isn't Justin Holl defense. He's on my list as number 3, but I would almost prioritize guys on the forward core who are doing nothing where we have an excess of players, and those guys make substantially more money.
Yeah. I just think, what is his cap at, like $3.5 million, Holl's? Like, I just feel like
310.
Yeah, I just feel like there is a lot. You can use that money to then bolster the right side in free agency and get a marked improvement overhaul. And like, obviously,
you can also do that by getting rid of Compher and Tarasenko, though, too.
Right. But that, I mean, yeah, then you're down a forward, and like Compher is going to play middle 6 for you. I mean, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but like right now he's going to be in the middle 6. Then you have to add a right side defenseman still, if not multiple, and now you're down a forward. Look, I'm not trying to, Compher didn't obviously. I reflect and mirror all of your sentiments there. Like, Compher didn't have a very good year, and Tarasenko was a massive disappointment. Yeah, I don't know. Any of those 3 guys is okay. I mean, mostly for me at least, like mostly Tarasenko and Holl. I think they're kind of on another level even.
Right. For me, Compher, the biggest thing is just the tenure and the money. He could bounce back and be great again, and I think that he has the best opportunity of those 3 to do that. But if you're looking to massively upgrade your top 6 and your top 4, like you could use that 5.25 elsewhere. You know what I mean? You'd get the most money back by offloading that contract.
Means it's the hardest to move. Pretty comfortably.
Also very true. Very true. There was another question about Compher, too, that we might as well just jump right into. This is from Robert Fellrath at 4935 on YouTube. I realize everyone bags on Compher, but he was fine in his first season with us. Does he have the ability to do the Marco Kasper role on the top line? And he also says, we'd all love a version of Marner, Bennett, Ehlers in that role, but we have to be realistic about our chances to get them at a tolerable number. I'm holding out hope that Kyle Connor wants to come home next summer because he's a pending UFA in the 2026 offseason. One, just real quick, would love to have Kyle Connor back. I'm not confident the Jets will let him go, but maybe he's a hometown boy who wants to return.
And I remember
I'm with you on that one.
The first time that conversation happened, and
right.
Wanted him, yeah.
But I thought he brought up a really interesting point, right? Like, Compher's role on this team is kind of fluid right now with Marco Kasper and Andrew Kopp having a nice bounce back season before his injury under McClellan. He played well in that second line. Kasper took over when he got hurt, and he played really well in that second line. And it kind of makes Compher the odd man out in terms of centers unless you want to slot him in on 4C. So it does raise the question, can he be a top-line winger with Larkin and Raymond? And of your options, he is definitely one of the more competent players you have. I don't hate the idea. My one problem with Compher is he just does not play with enough pace to play with Larkin and Raymond, who are markedly faster players. But he is a player that's not afraid to get in the corners, and he's very two-way responsible. And he gives you a right-handed option in the face-off circle, in faceoffs. So that all combined kind of does give a little intrigue to him as being a top line winger option. It's just mostly his pace that would worry me about putting him up there.
Yeah, I think he adds an element that the top line needs. I think that, man, like I'll tell you what, I don't love the idea of him at 2C going into the year. So if you're making me pick between one of those two, I'd probably honestly pick top line wing. He's a guy that adds a little bit of defense, can go get pucks in the corner and get it out for the playmakers there. I think there's a chance that fit works. I also think that they put Comfort in a lot of different situations this past year to try to get him going, and really nothing worked. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, he wouldn't be my first or second choice in that role, but if he's an odd man out in the center, it's worth giving a shot, at least during training camp and whatnot, to see if there's any chemistry there. Scotty, let's take another quick break. When we return, we'll answer a few more questions, and we'll send you guys off into, it's not the weekend yet. Memorial Day is messing me up. We got one more episode before then. We'll send you into Friday, I guess. Stay tuned to Locked on Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked on Red Wings podcast. All right, so the next question, Scotty, comes from Disciple of Larkin 71 on YouTube. Great name. If you could pick only one, Scotty, would you pick a top 4 defenseman to help Seider and Edvinsson, or a top 6 winger to play with Larkin and Raymond? Just curious what you think is our number one need. And he also says, love the pod. Let's go Red Wings. Appreciate that, Disciple of Larkin. Hope your training is going well. Scotty, what if you had to choose only one, a top 4 defenseman or a top 6 forward, what would you choose?
This is not even close for me, so I'd like to hear your answer first.
So for me, the question shifts based on, do I have the knowledge of what is in free agency or not? Because if the answer is Mitch Marner, top 6 forward every single day. But if we're going solely based on this team's biggest needs, because again, we've talked about how Marner outweighs all of the other needs just because he's that good, it would be top 4 defensemen. This team desperately, you have 5 out of 6 top 6 forwards. You have 2 out of 4 top 4 defensemen.
Yeah. So I think I'm with you. I think Marner is kind of,
he's the exception,
right? Like his own thing almost. If you're asking me Marner or anything else, I'm taking Marner. But if it's just positional group wise, it is not even close to me. I think this team needs blue line help so unbelievably badly that is, to me, like one of, if not the highest priority of the offseason, especially if they're just going to sit on their hands with the goaltender room. I think there's a real winning argument that the blue line is just straight up the biggest area of need for the Wings going into the summer.
I completely agree. That's why, like, obviously, again, Marner, if you can get him. If not, definitely try and hammer home some top defensemen.
Barely even counts in the conversation. Yeah.
Like, for me, it goes Marner number 1 target, Gavrikov number 2. Like, you need to try and hunt down Gavrikov if you can. So the next question, Scotty, is from Musek4327 on Twitter. It says, would you like the Wings to trade for Alexis Lafreniere? The Rangers are cap-strapped and need to sign Kuhl and Miller still. Laf contract is 7 years, 7.4 AAV. And I mentioned this before we recorded, and you brought up a really funny point. You said, wouldn't it be ironic after all of the fits we threw, we still ended up with the number 1 overall pick from 2020? And I think that would be ironic, Scotty. Even poetic, Even
poetic, yeah. There's a lot of nuance in this conversation, too. I think with the cap going up, it becomes a lot more digestible and a lot easier to kind of stomach that type of money. I think that the production is just not as, I don't know, like I don't think that I am confident in the production living up to that yet to maybe pull the trigger on it. But I think that's also to play devil's advocate with myself, like that's part of the risk reward of doing a deal like this, right? Is like you're hoping, like, okay, it's a solid player either way, right? I think a little bit of a step back point wise this year, but was around the same. Like you are going to get a solid player, but it might not be worth that contract. And for the amount of years that are left, that's obviously the risk you run. And you're hoping that obviously you can reach that kind of untapped potential that was bestowed on him. And he's still pretty young. So I think I'd lean no, but I appreciate the creativity. I like the creativity of trying to find deals like that. And I wouldn't really hate anybody who maybe would go out on a limb and say yes.
Right. So this is another situation too where it's like the cap rising might make this contract not look so bad, right? We're talking about Sam Bennett on the free agent market, whose career high is 50 points, getting not potentially up to $10 million this offseason. That'd be insane, but he might. And so Lafreniere at 23 years old, making 7.45 for a career high of 57 points last year before dipping back down to 45 this year, definitely is a big pill to swallow, and that you would really be banking on his production getting back into at least the 50s. Because I think if the production gets back in the 50s by the end of next offseason, right, where the salary cap finally gets over $100 million, that's probably not a terrible deal anymore.
Right.
And I mean, he does fill a need for this team, right? Left wing, right wing. He doesn't play any PKs, offense only guy. He doesn't make your team any better defensively. So, like, I think overall, I would still lean no because again, your team needs to get better defensively. Your team needs to get tougher to play against. I don't think he helps in either of those categories.
Well,
but if you could
production, kind of like similar to what we were talking about with Lombardi, right? Where like if the production outweighs it for the value you're getting him at, then
right.
Who cares almost? But like. I think this is an instance where we just haven't seen that level of production consistently enough to be confident in the amount of value that bringing in that contract with
right. And I just need him, like, if you can get the Rangers to retain 25% over the course of the next 6 years of this deal,
Sure.
then I'm like, okay, sure, I'm all in, but I don't think that's very likely because that's a long time to retain money. As of right now, current Lafreniere, who just came off like a 45-point season this year after his career high year of 57, like that's a tough pill to swallow even with the cap rising.
That's part of it too, right? Where like if he breaks out next year, then guess what? No one's going to trade for him because it becomes a steal of a contract. So like that's just part of that's why GMs get paid a bleep ton of money. Like that's the hard part of the sport. So
yes. And then I think the final question here, Scotty, great question, by the way. I love creative ones like that. The final question is from Facebook, a Facebook question from Chad Cranmer. And how hot is Yzerman's seat? Will they finally fix the defense this summer? They've been playing number 6 caliber guys in the second pair for way too long. Who's the next prospect to break into the lineup? We kind of mentioned that third part. And as far as the second part goes, where you ask, will they finally fix the defense? God, I hope so. That would be nice. Unfortunately, don't have the answer to that one. I don't have a crystal ball. I hope so, Chad. But the first part we can at least talk about with the how hot is Yzerman's seat. And I think it comes back to, Scotty, who are you asking? Are you asking the ownership or the fans? Because you'll get different answers.
Yeah, I think, look, I kind of like what you said. They should fix the defense. That should be a very high priority. And I think that almost kind of pairs into the hot seat question where it's like if they roll into next season, this upcoming season, this fall, if they roll into opening night with the decor looking exactly like it does today on May 29th, then I think that's an atrocity. And like I think that if you go in to this season with the goalie room looking how it does, the blue line looking how it does, and the offensive kind of roller coaster that we just went on, I think that's pretty inexcusable. So I think that today, I know some people hear this and they're like, it's on fire. He should have been fired. Like there's already, plenty, a pretty large percentage of I wouldn't say large percentage. There's already a decent chunk of the fan base that is kind of turned on Yzerman. And like, I don't blame people for that, but I think This is a huge cop out, but like you're gonna have to ask me in like 2 months. Like I am not ready to like go to LCA with pitchforks today. But like if this off season is super underwhelming, then I might be.
So I think that from the ownership level, from the actual is the seat hot, I don't think the seat's hot. I think Chris Ilitch has full faith in Steve Yzerman. I think he's given the keys to Steve Yzerman to drive this thing, and his seat won't get hot unless this team just crashes and burns in this current build. But as it stands, even with the down year, the team still is building towards something. And I think for Chris Ilitch, who is a less involved owner than his father was, that is enough to keep him around for now. From the fans' perspective, I think the seat is a little warm. I think you're seeing a lot of people who have come to terms, like myself, that Yzerman is in fact a human being, is good at some things and poor at others. Being one of those things being his free agent evaluation and getting impact guys to sign deals here. But at the same time, he's done great with the amateur scouting, things we've all talked about. So it comes back to, again, who you're asking. I think in the fan base, yeah, the seat's a little warm, but that doesn't unfortunately mean anything. The seat can be warm with the fans, but as long as the fans keep showing up to LCA and the team is still overall at least competitive, I don't think it'll be hot with the ownership anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
All right. So greatly appreciate everyone who contributed. Apologies again if we didn't get to your question, but we will be doing more in the future. So, Scotty, any final thoughts?
We ball, baby.
We absolutely ball. When we return tomorrow, we will be doing a prospect profile with Prashanth Iyer. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.